everybody, and welcome to our conversation on the latest research from the Sales Management Association on go-to-market planning. And now we're going to shift a little bit to talk about the implication on compensation and incentives and how that translates to organizational performance and effective decision-making. And so, James, one of the key things that stood out, this is a quote directly from the report. It says, "We find that sales compensation is a bellwether indicator of management effectiveness in both decision-making and in change management in organizations." And so I'm curious, does that resonate with your experience? Does that resonate with what you've seen with customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the interesting thing for me is that it probably echoes a conversation I was having with one of our organizations that we partner with over here, and the conversation was from a UK perspective specifically. It was, listen, incentives embodies the culmination of all of our planning efforts. You can't start and do compensation plans if you don't know the territories and the targets and all of those different things that go into it. You don't know the overall goals. So when you look at it, it's a downstream impact of all of these different things. But if you don't get incentives right and the incentives change correct, the impact that it has cascading around the organization is quite large. And the interesting thing, and this same partner I was talking to said, we know plan changes are coming. And there's a lot of anxiety around that. The uncertainty of the plan changes, like, oh, geez, what's the sales team going to come up with this time? So they're really looking at it as they understand that this change does impact not only compensation, but so many other parts of the sales organization that it really does embody the culmination of that go-to-market planning.
That's right. And in conversations we've had just frequently, and I guess even more frequently over the last 2 or 3 years, it seems, is that we're moving from compensation being really tactical. It's important. It's an important part of our organization. It's tactical, but it's really, I think companies are really recognizing it more as a strategic part of their business and their strategy. And like you said, it's downstream from a lot of the planning processes. So it just really elevates the impact of compensation, but the strategic need that needs to be kind of filtered up through all go-to-market activities. And so, James, in the face of this shift from seeing compensation more as a tactical way of getting our sales force to execute to really being a strategic part of our decision-making and our planning and our adaptation and management throughout the year, what are some of the big areas where you're hearing from companies and you're seeing this kind of change in compensation is designed more strategically?
Yeah, absolutely. There's sort of two different pieces. There's the shift of focus from a pure execution component where it's just about sales, it's just about revenue, it's just about that end number, to a more strategic, holistic view of compensation and how we're looking at the motivational factors and the behaviors that you want to be able to incentivize, and how that's going to impact not only the final sale, but the entire end-to-end journey that the buyer is going to go on. And then the second piece is that organizations are realizing that you can't have a plan at the start of the year and stick with it for the rest of the year. It really doesn't work that way anymore. There's so much change that's out there. We talked about that in one of the other videos. But really, they need to be more agile. They need to be more flexible in these plans. And with that comes a need to be much more effective in the communication of the plan, the strategic components of that plan, the behaviors that they're looking to motivate as a part of the whole wider plan adoption piece. And I think that's really, really interesting in terms of how you can take other components as well, things like their territories, things like their targets or quotas, and drive that through that compensation plan discussion and dissemination and amplification to the field, be it the first time that they roll it out or being an iterative throughout that agile process that I talked about.
Yeah, I think that's right. And if I think back a little bit to our previous conversation about this idea of change and how things are changing, the need for change is increasing, the speed of change is increasing. A company that came to us and was looking for our help in this area was basically described this situation where they wanted to introduce a new product. And it took them, I think it was, 4 to 6 months to get their sales force actually actively focusing on that. If you think about we go back to the core of incentives and the motivational components and the psychological components of what incentives are. If all of those things you just described, if the territories aren't set up to support that new product rollout, if the quotas aren't set up to support a focus on that and objectives and goals and performance outcomes on that new product, and then ultimately, if the incentives for a salesperson to sell that new product are not aligned appropriately, it's a time waste. So there is a cost. You may not see that cost in the short term, but there is a cost to not being able to react quickly. right? And being able to actually shift those things midstream. And so just think about for that company that came to us, if that was 4 to 6 months almost of lost selling time, if those changes could have been implemented in a week or 2 weeks, or even proactively as they knew this new product was coming out, so that on day one things could really be rolled out in a more effective and fresh way, there the potential of that and the gain to selling time, which otherwise would have just been written off as lost, is going to be better for the salespeople. It's going to be better for the company. It's going to be better for the adoption and success of that new product. And it's ultimately just going to help with the perpetuation of change that's coming in the future as well.
And I would even say that sort of 4 to 6 months that you talked about is almost it's elongated by the fact that organizations don't pay at point of sale for a lot of their commission. It's another pay cycle, 2 pay cycles, 3 pay cycles out before an individual actually gets the reward for that activity that they're looking to incentivize. So you think about that, you could be talking in that 4 to 6 month example, looking at 8-9 months before an individual actually gets recognition for selling that new product. Just to sort of think about this in a different way, and I kind of want to pivot here because it just brought an idea to my mind, is let's say we take a step back and we say, okay, Curtis, what are you seeing in terms of some of the ways incentives might be changing, or innovative ways that organizations are talking about incentives, things that we can give some of the audience ideas around how they could look at changes for their compensation strategies?
Well, that's really interesting, James. It's one of the conversations that I love to have with companies that we're working with. There's a few things I feel like that come to mind. The first is creating a balance in performance metrics. So there will always be the long-term lagging indicators, the how many widgets did you sell, how far along to quota did you achieve, like all those things that will always be part of it. But a lot of innovative companies are looking at more of a balanced approach, looking at short-term leading indicators, the number of quality conversations that we have. Did you deliver business value in that? Because they know there's behaviors that lead to those outcomes. And so let's be more innovative. Let's use the flexibility that's required in this area to drive incentives along the way to those bigger outcomes. I also look at more even beyond the sale metrics and things that we incentivize that are good for our customers. So are we looking at customer satisfaction and repeat business? Are we looking at growth? Are we looking at actual specific customer success benchmarks and metrics that our customers are hitting as a way of incentivizing even sometimes the whole organization to support the what's best for the customers and the outcomes for the customers. So that balance is the first one. A second one that comes to mind is this idea of linearity. And I think any sales leader would appreciate this and also probably feel some heart palpitations come up when you start talking about linearity, because as former sellers, it's very natural to say, well, that deal, I'll just drop it on the last day of the year or the last day of the quarter, and hopefully I can make it work somehow in between there. But that really makes my forecasting suffer as a sales leader. That really will hurt. So we see a lot of innovative companies looking at linearity and saying, how can we incentivize bringing a deal in the first month of the quarter, or bringing a deal in the second month of the quarter, rather than waiting towards the end and potentially risking slippage. So linearity is a big piece of that too.
And I mentioned a bit more about sort of that holistic view of incentives. I think you can take that even a step further. You and I were talking about this before. It's like holistic view of what incentives actually mean. So do you want to give a sneak peek on that one?
Yeah, I mean, because there's always going to be those things that we think of holistic incentives like President's Club and going on a trip to Hawaii, or picking that latest widget out of the fulfillment warehouse because I racked up a whole bunch of points, or whatever it is. So that those things are still real. But I think as individuals become and look for more out of their jobs, even the kinds of things that they want to do to grow and engage individually and grow and engage with the company that they represent, there are things that we can incentivize more holistically that'll make employees even more sticky and grow while they're inside the organization. So can we incentivize learning and development? I don't mean just like the normal things that we would do to learn a sales process or annual compliance, but those things that help them acquire new skills, that help them get better and help them get better as they're selling our products, the things that help foster a culture of growth and improvement. And then even holistically, like I talked about a few moments ago, when you have flexibility in how you incentivize, if trying to get our customers successful using our products and our services is the end goal, everybody in the organization can be incentivized toward moving towards that, whether you're in marketing or in product development or in customer success or whatever it might be. Having flexibility in those incentives can help drive better outcomes for our customers as well.
So I'm just going to jump in because I've got one more that I think is really important, and it is the timeliness of incentives. And we talked about this a little bit when we're talking about the new product. And I think from there, what you start to look at is that if you're able to reinforce that behavior through that incentive payment or incentive reward, whatever it might be, much quicker, so that lag between action and the behavior that you're looking to incentivize and the actual reward is shortened, you start to be able to reinforce it a lot better. It tries much more effective from the compensation strategy, but it also means that you're having the individuals consistently perform and the behaviors that you're looking for them to enact with the customer. You're able to do that on a much more frequent basis. And I think even if you take it a step further, we were talking to a retailer that came to us and said, we need to pay our people faster. It takes us too long to calculate. We can't really get it. And we were able to look and say, hey, that's gone from 2 weeks down to 2 or 3 days. And that, while 2 weeks is probably really good for a lot of organizations in the retail world, being able to have that reinforcement that quick was a game changer for them in making sure that the behaviors that they were looking to motivate in their compensation plans was reflected in the actions that were taken, and then they were rewarded quite quickly thereafter.